In 2001, 20-year-old Nasrin was burned to death in her own home. A trial court quickly handed down life sentences to her killers, but years later, an appellate court overturned the conviction and let them walk free. This is the story of a legal anomaly and the Supreme Court's fight to fix it. The foundational facts are simple. Nasrin was married to Ajmal Beg for just over a year. She lived in a household in Uttar Pradesh with Ajmal and his mother, Jamila. Shortly after the wedding, the demands began. Ajmal and Jamila repeatedly pressured Nasrin's father for a color television, a new motorcycle, and 15,000 rupees in cash. Nasrin's father was a poor man. He told them he simply couldn't afford it. On June 5, 2001, the situation turned fatal. After another unmet demand the previous day, neighbors outside heard Nasrin's frantic cries for help. By the time her uncle reached the spot, the accused were fleeing the house. Inside, they found Nasrin doused in kerosene and engulfed in flames. The initial legal outcome was straightforward. The trial court convicted both the husband and mother-in-law under Section 304B for dowry death and Section 498A for cruelty. They were both sentenced to life imprisonment. This delivered the expected justice. However, the legal focus of this case shifts entirely to the shocking reversal that occurred during the appeal. The High Court of Allahabad eventually heard the appeal and issued a complete acquittal for both perpetrators. To justify this, the judges relied on a series of unusual socioeconomic assumptions. First, the High Court argued that because Ajmal's family was impoverished, they wouldn't even be able to afford the electricity or maintenance for a TV or a motorcycle. Therefore, the court concluded that the dowry demand was improbable. Next, the judges looked at the timing. Because Nasrin's mother admitted there were no dowry demands before the wedding, the High Court claimed subsequent demands didn't count. They effectively ruled that a marriage starting without a dower could not later become a dowry death case. Finally, they dismissed the uncle's testimony. Even though he arrived immediately and saw the accused fleeing, the court ruled his evidence was entirely insufficient because he hadn't witnessed the exact moment the fire was lit. By prioritizing these technicalities and assumptions, the High Court dismantled the statutory protections meant to safeguard vulnerable women, creating a dangerous legal precedent. When the case reached the Supreme Court, the justices labeled the High Court's logic fallacious. They outright dismissed the poverty defense, stating that a family's income is legally irrelevant to whether they committed extortion or murder. The court pointed to Section 2 of the Dowry Prohibition Act. As this timeline shows, the law is clear. A dowry demand is illegal, whether it happens before the ceremony, at the wedding, or at any point afterward. The justices then applied Section 113B of the Indian Evidence Act. This creates a presumption of dowry death. If the state proves a woman was harassed for dowry shortly before an unnatural death, the burden of proof shifts. The court used the uncle's testimony to trigger this presumption. Seeing the husband fleeing a burning home established cruelty soon before death. At that point, the law required Ajmal to prove his innocence, a burden he failed to meet. This ruling restored the legal presumptions that prevent abusers from hiding behind procedural loopholes or the silence of deceased victims. The Supreme Court set aside the acquittal and fully restored Ajmal's life sentence, ordering him to surrender to custody within 4 weeks. The court made a specific humanitarian exception for the mother-in-law, Jamila. At 94 years old, her extreme physical frailty meant that incarceration would be inhumane, so while her conviction was restored, she was exempted from prison. The court used this final judgment to issue a sweeping commentary on the institution of dowry itself, identifying it as an institutionalized, cross-cultural evil. The justices noted how the modern dowry system has infected multiple communities, often displacing protective customs like the Islamic mehr. In many cases, mehr has become nominal, while the real financial pressure flows from the bride's family to the groom. By examining Nasrin's death, the Supreme Court issued a sweeping indictment of how societal practices across all religions actively devalue women as sources of financial extraction. To fight this at the root, the court issued systemic directives. They mandated updates to school curricula to teach equality in marriage and ordered the strict empowerment of dowry prohibition officers across all states. The justices also called for the fast-track disposal of all pending dowry death and cruelty cases, along with mandatory awareness programs at the district level to reach those outside the formal education system. For more deep dives into the landmark cases shaping Indian law, Make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. The Ajmal Beg judgment serves as a permanent warning. The justice system will continuously evolve its mechanisms to hunt down and eradicate the institutionalized evil of dowry.